Before each fantasy baseball season gets started, we do the same thing. Every fantasy owner has a checklist, and on that checklist are several names of players that you must have for the upcoming season. For one reason or another, you've pinpointed those players and said, at the end of my draft, I need all of those guys on my roster. Heck, these are players that you must have more than the Astros must have trash cans to win a World Series. What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners and our first fantasy baseball episode of the 2020 season. If you're new to the Fantasy Headliners, welcome. Thanks to have you catching this video. We do talk a little fantasy baseball in the offseason. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to help you get ready for your fantasy baseball draft. We typically only do fantasy baseball stuff in the offseason just because we have so much football stuff that we do in season. It's really hard to keep up with everything baseball related. However, we had such good results and we put together some great content last offseason. We had a lot of people saying, hey, got to bring it back again this offseason. So Jake and I sat down and said, for sure, let's get some more fantasy baseball material on the channel to get you all ready if you're playing fantasy baseball for the 2020 regular season. Now, spring training is underway. Everyone's reported. Full workouts have been done. We've even got some games in the books at this point. So we are inching closer and closer. Now, you do have a little bit of time before your draft takes place. Not a whole lot of people have started drafting at this point. But what we're going to do in this video, I've got 4 players for you that are must-haves for me this season. Now, we know. Mike Trout is a must-have. Ronald Acuna Jr. is a must-have. All these guys are must-haves at the very top of our draft boards. We know those names. However, these are 4 names that I think when you take a look at this season, you're not necessarily going to say it's a must-have for you. But based on some information that I've gathered for you, their current draft stock, ADP, things of that nature, I definitely think you need to be taking a look at them prior to drafting. So let's jump into it. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about my 4 must-haves for the 2020 fantasy baseball season. All right, the first name that I have for you, he could have very well gone in my bounce back episode that I'm gonna be doing here in the next couple of weeks. He's a guy that was a must-have for a lot of fantasy baseball owners last season, but I'm gonna chalk it up to some bad luck, maybe some issues at the plate in terms of doing a little too much, and I'm gonna put Andrew Benintendi back on my must-have list for this year. Outfielder from the Boston Red Sox. 2019 finish, he finished 136 overall, was the number 36 outfielder, and right now his 2020 ADP has him going 90th overall as the outfielder 24. Now here's the thing about Andrew Benintendi that probably caused some issues for him last year. Let's take a look at the information, then I'll break it down a little bit more for you. His fly ball rate last year increased to 40.8%, but his infield fly ball rate also increased. That went up to 10.3%. Right there, that's already cueing a couple of things for me, okay? It was obvious he was trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark a little too often. How do I also know that? His K percentage was up to 22.8%. The previous 2 years, it was 16 and 17%. His walk percentage was down to 9.4%. The last 2 years, 10.7%, 10.6%. So again, possibly looking for that pitch, swinging a little bit too hard, trying to pull the ball out of the ballpark. That will happen a lot, especially when you see that infield fly ball rate increase. That tells you right there that he's dipping his shoulder, getting under the ball, popping it up because he's trying to hit it out of the ballpark. Another thing, too, to kind of key on, last year his batting average on balls in play was 333. He's got a career average of 323 of batting average of balls in play. So the thing is that wasn't astronomical. So that wasn't through the roof. It wasn't really low either. It was just 10 points off of what his career norm is. That tells me there, right as well, too, that that wasn't something that we need to account for. A lot of times when you see a guy with a very low batting average of balls in play, maybe he had a little bit too much or a little bit too much bad luck last year. Maybe he had way too much good luck and it was through the roof. This was right within his career norm, so that was good to see that. Now, his line drive percentage was only down slightly as well, down to 25%. The last 3 years at 29, 27, and 29. So he was still hitting the ball hard, okay? Wasn't getting overly lucky, so that batting average that we saw last year being on the lower side isn't anything to be concerned about because he wasn't getting overly lucky. He wasn't dealing with a whole lot of bad luck. The thing was, is he was trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Reports from camp right now say Benintendi has leaned out a little bit, okay? He bulked up a lot prior to the 2019 season. Again, trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Coming off of his 2018 season, he slashed 290, 366, 465. So that was his batting average, on-base percentage, slugging percentage. He had 41 doubles, 16 home runs, 87 RBIs, 21 stolen bases. This was a guy that was only 4 home runs away from a 20-20-20 season. Okay, 20 doubles, 20 home runs, 20 stolen bases. That's excellent, okay? That's an excellent season, and I think maybe Benintendi just tried a little too much to make things happen at the plate and pull the ball out of the ballpark. So I think we're going to get back to seeing the Benintendi from a couple of years ago. We're going to see that batting average go back up, and I think we're going to see about 20 home runs or so. He's another year into his career, so he's a little bit smarter. He was still a little bit younger last season and only his third year. So I'm going to give him the benefit of a doubt, okay? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he's going to bounce back this year. And even though they've gotten rid of Mookie Betts there in Boston, they still have a pretty solid lineup around him. I mean, they still have Xander Bogaerts there. They still have J.D. Martinez there. And Alex Verdugo, I like him a lot too. I think he's going to be a guy that's is going to do well in that lineup. Now, he's not Mookie Betts by any means, in no way, shape, or form, but I still think he's going to be a good addition to that lineup. So I am not moving on from Andrew Benintendi, and I'm definitely going to try and get him as much as possible, especially going as the 24th outfielder off the board, going in that 90 range right now. You're going to get a ton of value for him if you get him around there. But one thing to keep in mind too, okay, a little bit of draft feedback here for you, giving you some information heading into your draft. Don't wait for that ADP to come, okay? Take him before that. Make sure you get him before someone else does. My next must-have for the 2020 season, also an outfielder, but we're going to head to Chicago. We're going to talk about Eloy Jimenez from the Chicago White Sox. Chicago White Sox getting a lot better. I'm a Tigers fan, okay? I'm a Tigers fan, but I have to give the White Sox credit. Maybe could have spent just a tad bit more this offseason, but a little bit more aggressive maybe for a starting pitcher, but that's all right. Don't worry about it. A lot of good young talent coming very quickly for the Chicago White Sox. So let's talk about Jimenez here for a second. 2019 finished 81 overall, outfielder 22. Right now his ADP going a little bit higher than that, 63 overall, and as the outfielder 19. Now, couple of guys that are going right now around that area. Jorge Soler, okay, from the Kansas City Royals is a guy there. Keep an eye on him. I might have a little bit more information from him about him later on. Victor Roble from the Washington Nationals also going around that area too. Jimenez is a guy that had a very, very quiet 30 home run season last year. And let's just be honest, okay? A lot of people are talking about it, about the balls were juiced last season. A lot of home runs. A lot of guys hit 30 home runs last year. And because of that, the season was a little bit more quiet for him. I don't think people were talking about him nearly as much as at the end of the season as they were at the beginning of the season. A lot of that was due to his slow start, okay? In the first half of the season, 241 average, struck out 72 times, only a 303 on-base percentage, 482 slugging, 785 on-base plus slugging. In the second half, though, he got things going again. He looked a lot better. Again, this was a guy that a lot of people were excited about before the season started. I mean, this was one of the young guys that a lot of fantasy owners were scrambling to try and draft a little bit earlier than his ADP was because of that potential. in the White Sox lineup in that ballpark there in Chicago. Good home run hitting park. He was exceptionally good down the stretch. Now, let's bounce back for just a second. In the second half, raise that average up to 292, okay? Drop the strikeouts. That's a big thing for me. To see him strike out less in the second half is great. I love seeing that because that right there, to me, shows that he got a little bit smarter at the plate there in the second half. Yes, the second half is a few games shorter than what the first half is, but I'll still take it. Glad to see that number there. 328 on base percentage. He was getting on base a little bit more. The slugging percentage went up. The OPS went up greatly in the second half. He was exceptionally good down the stretch as well. He had a 281 average in August, and then in September and October, skyrocketed to 340. So he really ended the season on a tear. He did very, very well in September and October. Love to see young kids finish strong. He could have given up. He could have slowed down after that slow start. He's a young kid. Let it affect him all season long and then bounce back this year. No, he grinded it out and he ended up finishing very, very well. Here's the thing about the lineup around him as well. This is a perfect scenario. And as I'm talking, I'm realizing that I wrote perfect scenario. I don't know what that means. I apologize. There for that typo. It's the perfect scenario, though, okay? My boy, Johan Moncada at the beginning of the lineup. I love Moncada, okay? Awesome. He is an excellent player. Tim Anderson, okay? Great hitter. Last year led the league in average. I didn't see that coming. I thought he was going to slow down the stretch. He didn't. Jose Abreu. Now, in a perfect scenario, Jimenez ends up hitting in that 4 spot right after Abreu, right before Encarnacion and Granda. Right now, some projections, so he's going to hit behind Grandal, and I don't love that spot for him. I would rather have him hit a little bit higher because if you give him that protection from Edwin Encarnacion, that's going to give him some great pitches to hit, especially if he has that speed in front of him. The speed of Moncada, the speed of Anderson. If you've got those guys on the base pass, you've got Jimenez at the plate, and you've got Edwin Encarnacion lurking over there in the on-deck circle, he's going to get some fastballs. So he's going to get a ton of RBI opportunities. He's going to have a ton of home runs. I expect him to hit over 30 home runs again. I expect that average to go up. I expect him to get on base a little bit more. The RBIs are going to be there for him, okay? This is definitely a guy that, to me, has top 10 outfielder potential this season. So, again, if you hold off on those outfielders there in the first round, so Trout, Betts, Acuna, they come off the board early on, and you have more of a mid-range pick in that first round, focus on an Arenado or a Bregman or something else along those lines and kind of stay away from the outfield and then focus on those guys a couple of rounds later because they're going to give you tremendous value, especially with Benintendi giving you some all-around numbers and then Jimenez giving you some awesome power numbers later on as well. Okay, we talked about 2 outfielders. I've got one more hitter for you here before we switch over to pitching. And we're going to talk about Matt Olson, first baseman from the Oakland Athletics. I've heard his name coming up more and more often, so maybe not, you've already done a little bit of research on him. But I definitely think he's one of the best first base values right now. He is going a little bit higher in terms of what the other 2 guys are going. So right now, his ADP is at 64 overall. He's the 5th first baseman off of the board. His 2019 finish was great, 55 overall and the 4th overall first baseman. But last year, he missed 35 games with a hamate bone, which typically causes issue for power hitters. You may have heard people talk about this in the past or with other hitters, depending on how deep you dive into baseball. But that hamate bone in your wrist, that can cause a lot of issues in getting through the pitch, extending, and lifting the ball out of the ballpark. A lot of hitters, especially power hitters with that type of an injury, it can cause them a little bit of slower bat speed, okay? But it can also cause them to kind of hold up a little bit because you don't want to get hit in that spot. You don't want to get hit in the wrist. You don't want to extend all the way through sometimes. Also, that wrist can be a little sore and a little stiff. So you can't really get that flexibility in your wrist that you need to really get the bat through the zone and get the ball lifted and out of the ballpark. that can cause some issues sometimes. Giving you a little bit of background there, and if you think I sound crazy, I did play baseball, okay? So my background is strongly in baseball, people. So if you know me because of the football that we've done here, I'm going to tell you, baseball was my very first love. I've spent hours and hours and hours at the ballpark playing, watching, everything like that. So hope you trust me again with fantasy baseball this season. But let's get back to Matt Olson. So he missed 35 games with that injury. A lot of people thought it was going to cause issues with his power, and it didn't. 36 home runs in 2019. That was 13 and a half home runs, or 13 and a half home runs per at bat, okay? So, every 13 and a half at bats, he was hitting the ball out of the ballpark. That was 12th overall in Major League Baseball. So an excellent ratio there for him. So a lot of times it's a really good ratio to look at, especially when you're looking at guys who miss significant time, because if they miss significant time, you can always go back and look at that and say, well, that ratio still works out well for him because it was every 13 and a half at bats, 12th overall. That shows you really how often he was hitting a home run, and you're not just looking at those overall numbers in a big sample size. His hard hit percentage was 6 overall, so 50.3% of the time he was hitting the ball hard. That was 6 overall in Major League Baseball. His exit velocity, which was 97.1, was tied for 8th overall. And again, we're looking at this and saying that Hammett bone last year, even though he missed 35 games, came back from it. It didn't hamper him at all. So this season, fully healthy, has been ready all offseason, working all offseason. That is definitely in the past now. I'm all on board Matt Olson because I think he's going to have a fabulous season. And a lot of times with left-handed hitters as well, you get a little bit concerned. Now, his numbers in terms of strikeouts and his average definitely different against left-handers and right-handers, but the power numbers, they were consistent. Against left-handers, 14 at-bats per home run, and then 13 against right-handers. So he was doing well on both. It was just a 1 at-bat per home run. That's all it was, okay? A lot of times, sometimes you see those power numbers decrease against left-handers, especially for a left-handed hitter. That did not happen with Matt Olson last year. He was very consistent against both types of hitters. Again, you're going to see a little bit of a decrease in that strikeout and that average, but I'm not worrying about that with Matt Olson because I'm drafting him for his power, especially if you play like in a 5x5 type league. If you're not really counting average, there's some leagues out there today that don't count average. They would rather go off on base percentage or on base plus slugging. They do RBIs, they do home runs, they do maybe hits instead. So you're not gonna have to worry about that average with Matt Olson. But again, if you get Matt Olson, Andrew Benintendi, Eloy Jimenez, you've got yourself one heck of a solid lineup to start. All right, so now we've listed 3 must-have hitters that we're going to build our lineup around. But what are we going to do about our starting pitching now? Well, I've got a guy that you can probably wait on over the first couple of rounds and still draft as your starting pitcher 1. I'm going to be talking about Shane Bieber from the Cleveland Indians. And again, you can't tell me that being a Detroit Tigers fan clouds my judgment at all because I've got a White Sox and a Cleveland Indians player on this list, okay? The Tigers suck, though, so it doesn't really matter that much, right? Anyway, so Shane Bieber, starting pitcher from the Cleveland Indians. Now, let me tell you why I am okay with you taking him as your first pitcher in 2020. 2019 finish. Great finish. He was a top 15 overall player. He was the starting pitcher 7. A fantastic season. And more than likely, you didn't draft Shane Bieber unless you're in a deeper league or you were a truther because you were probably getting him off the waiver wire last year. His 2020 ADP right now sitting at 27 overall, starting pitcher 9. Okay? So depending on your league, if you're a league that really, really, really values pitching, okay, you might have to get Shane Bieber in the second round. If your league leans more towards hitting, you're going to be able to get Shane Bieber in the 3rd round. So just think about this. Think about this for a second. He's got like an early 3rd round ADP right now in a 12-team league. So you get the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th overall pick. Okay, so you're drafting yourself a Mike Trout, a Ronald Acuna Jr., you're drafting a Christian Yelich, you're drafting a Mookie Betts. Okay, you're drafting one of those big-time hitters at the beginning of the 1st. Okay, then take another hitter at the end of the 2nd round, depending on who falls there. And now you've got yourself 2 fantastic hitters to start your team. Shane Bieber goes to you at the beginning of the third round as your starting pitcher one. Now let's talk about why last season was such a success for him and why he really grew from 2018 to 2019. And the one thing that I key on specifically was the increase in quality starts, okay? That was huge. From 2018 to 2019, really keyed in on those quality starts, gave you a lot more quality starts. So if you're a league that values those and gives points for that, or it's a category, quality starts is going to be big for you. The big improvement for him that really helped with that was his hits per 9 inning. In 2018, Shane Bieber was giving up 10.2 hits per 9 innings. He got that all the way down to 7.8 in 2018. That was a huge jump for him to bring that down because, again, you know this, okay, it's not rocket science. The less hits you give up, the longer you're going to last. That's what she said. In a game, okay? That's what's going to happen. Give up less hits is the name of the game. And he did that in 2019. And part of that was his improved curveball. 27.7% of the time he was striking out hitters, he was using his curveball. That was his out pitch, okay? That was the one that he was burying and getting hitters to swing and missed on. Not only that, he had a lot better luck, but not the type of luck that would concern me to say, he might not have that great of a season this year. He might regress a little bit, okay? In fact, it's the other way around. In 2018, he gave up a 356 average to opposing hitters on balls in play. It was 298 in 2019, but the league average is only 297, okay? So he was super unlucky in 2018. His batting average and balls in play last year was more along the lines of the league average, which is exactly what you want to see from a pitcher. So again, if his batting average and balls in play last year, if that average was like 220 or 230, then yeah, 100%, I'd be more concerned. And I would say those hits per 9 innings are going to go back up because he got super lucky last season. He was super unlucky the season before. He was dead even with the league average last year, okay? That is why I am 100% okay with that. When you look at those hits per 9 innings, that you look at those and you say, that wasn't fool's gold, okay? That was Shane Bieber becoming a top-end starter, not only in the American League, but in Major League Baseball overall. Not only that, but he's going to benefit from something as well, and that's the division that he pitches in, okay? It's not a great division. The Cleveland Indians, obviously, they're there, but then their counterparts, the Chicago White Sox, their team is greatly improved. So the White Sox are going to be a lot better. I mean, this was a team that was top 6 in team strikeouts last year and bottom 6 in terms of contact rate, okay? It was not a good team in terms of those areas last season. However, they're going to be a lot better this year, but they're still going to be a team that's going to be prone to strike out against right-handed pitchers. Same thing goes for the Kansas City Royals, and especially true for the Detroit Tigers. I mean, the two big bats that the Tigers added over the offseason were right-handers, Cron and Scope. So with Scope and Cron, those were the big guys that they added to the lineup, but this is a predominantly right-handed lineup too. So you're going to see a lot of strikeouts from the Tigers as well. So he pitches in a division that's going to offer up a ton of strikeouts. So anytime you see him facing one of his division rivals, you're going to be excited for probably a dominant performance. So that's why Shane Bieber is definitely one of my must-haves this season, especially for starting pitching. And I think the 4 guys that I gave you today are all guys that you can get at different price points and actually draft in your lineup, on your roster. And that's what I like to do with these videos, these must-have videos, because, again, I could sit here and talk about Ronald Acuna Jr. I could talk about Mike Trout. I could talk about Mookie Betts. You're not getting all of those guys on the same team unless you play in some type of keeper or dynasty format, okay? If you're in redraft, you're not getting all those guys in your draft. So I want to give you several guys at different price points that you can realistically draft. You could realistically draft all 4 of these players. Bieber's going to be the early one. Maybe Bieber's around 3, around 4 for Matt Olson. 5 for Benintendi, 6 for Eloy Jimenez, okay? Maybe that's what ends up happening for you. Maybe you got a little bit sooner, though. Maybe you got to go 2, 3, 4, and 5 to make sure that you get these guys. But again, all different price points that are going to allow you to really key on these guys and say, man, I could get all of them if my draft runs well. So make sure you write these names down on your must-have list before drafting this season. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for tuning into the first fantasy baseball show of the season here on the Fantasy Headliners. Really appreciate it. Love to get back into some of the deep baseball knowledge. Really exciting time of the year. We got the Combine coming up for football. The XFL is doing well right now. We got baseball starting up. A lot of great things. March Madness is going to be coming up soon too. So good time to be a sports fan right now. But I need something from you, Headliner Nation. As always, if you appreciate the content, hit that like button below. If this is your first time checking out a video here at the Fantasy Headliners, though, become a part of Headliner Nation today. Hit that subscribe button for me and also turn on that bell notification so anytime we drop content, you're going to know about it right away. You're going to get a notification. So make sure you do that as well. We're going to be dropping some more fantasy baseball content. We're going to be dropping more fantasy football content, draft content, anything that you could possibly imagine. And also, if you have any questions, obviously leave that comment below, but tell me in the comments below, who is your must-own player for fantasy baseball this season? Who do you absolutely have to have on your team? Headliner Nation, thanks so much for tuning into this episode, and I will catch you on the next one. Have a great one.